help in that regard.
No, you're significantly younger than I am. You're supposed to be better at this than I am. Hi, everybody. It's just a couple minutes before 3, so we're going to wait just a few more minutes to start officially, but we're thrilled to have you here. Hopefully you can see us nicely. It is, what time is it in Alsace on? Is it 9?
Yep.
Oh, is your daughter gone to sleep?
No, she's not here tonight, so.
Okay.
I don't know, maybe, but probably soon or already, yes.
Well, you don't have to worry about a baby waking up. That's a great thing. And everyone, if you're wondering what order we're going to taste the wines, it's at the beginning of the chat. So just scroll up so you can take a look at that. But I'll repeat it as well. We're going to do the Pinot Gris, followed by the Riesling, followed by the Cuvée Frédéric Emile Riesling, and ending up with the Gewurztraminer. But I'll remind us all as we go along. And hopefully some of you have all 4, like Anne and I do. Patrick, what do you have open in front of you? Do you have all 4?
I have 3 of the wines. I unfortunately had sold all of the Frédéric Emile, so I don't get to taste it. But I was lucky enough. We did a dinner the dinner I did with Eric that I was telling you about. We paired the 2011 Frédéric Emile with one of the courses, so I've tasted it very recently, and it's fresh in my mind. So
well, now you have to tell us what food.
Well, right now.
No, that you paired at the dinner.
I'll wait until we have the wine in front of us. So
all righty then. I will look forward to that. Okay, we have about 40 people, and we're just going to wait another minute. Have you I don't know if you remember this, Anne, you were supposed to do a tasting in Michigan the week after COVID struck officially in the United States. I remember traveling back from Portland, Oregon on March 11th. And I landed, and my boss called me and said, we have to cancel all of our in-person tastings. And we were having you in Ann Arbor the following Thursday. I don't know if you remember that or not. So thanks to Stephanie and to Mr. Mankowski, who's in the background, we got you back, and I'm very grateful. And we got to have Patrick join us too, because you weren't going to be part of it.
It's a new way to enjoy wine behind the computer.
It is. Behind the computer, but it's also intimate, and I really like that. Alrighty, I think we should start officially. It's 3 o'clock, and I'm learning not to be on Greek time. So, welcome everyone. I'm Madeline from Plum Market, and my colleague and friend, Patrick, say hi.
Hi everyone.
Patrick is from the Reserve Food and Wine in Grand Rapids, and of course we have Anne Trimbach joining us from Alsace. We're thrilled to have her here, and we just were chatting about she was scheduled to come to Michigan to do a tasting in Ann Arbor. I think it was March 18th, and I had to cancel the previous week. So the universe is in alignment. We have her with us tonight, and we're thrilled. And we're just going to go through a couple of pieces of housekeeping. Plum and is very, very happy and proud to be partners with the Reserve on this tasting. One of the beautiful things about the virtual universe right now is that wine is still enthusiastically bringing people together. And there's no reason why a retailer and a restaurant that are respectful and celebrate each other can't join hands. So we're very happy to have guests joining us from Ann Arbor, from Bloomfield, West Bloomfield, Chicago, because we have a Chicago store on, and Grand Rapids, and Alsace, of course, and New York, actually. One of our friends, Stephanie Tuin from Tuin Communications, is quietly in the background, but she definitely knows more about Alsace than either Patrick or I know. So
I don't think so. I'm unmuting myself to protest about that. Absolutely not.
You've done seminars on Alsace called Alsace Rocks, but Patrick, I have to remind everyone, is Master Sommelier candidate who's passed his level 3 exam on the first try. I will remind us all, so I'm very proud of him. Couple pieces of housekeeping. We're going to try to keep this to an hour. If we run slightly over, not more than about 5 or 10 minutes, and we can liberate on from us. so she can get some rest, but I'll stop and chat at the end. We are doing this webinar style, so if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A, and Patrick and I will try to keep an eye on them, and maybe towards the end, Patrick, you tell me, we can risk unmuting everybody or ask or enable people to unmute themselves if they want to ask a question in person. And what else to tell you? We will be showing some slides. We're going to keep this pretty casual. We really, you know, one of the things I like on about this being the end of your day is that you're more relaxed than you would be hopefully at the beginning of your day. So we'd like to keep it casual, and we might interject with a few questions here and there. You know, to me, Trimbach and Alsace mean a couple of things. One, I was lucky enough to meet Anne's, I believe, great uncle, Hubert, at the London Chop House when I worked there from in the 80s. And those of you who are in Michigan know the London Chop House was Michigan's 21 club. And also, I've been lucky enough to visit your winery in 2009. Did you go away, Patrick? Oh, you're cleaning your screen. Okay.
I'm just wiping.
So, and it was one of the best, if not the best winery visits I've ever had in my life, because everything from the Pinot Blanc to the SGN was spectacular. So what we're going to experience today is dependable excellence from not only a producer who's iconic, but in terms of wine, but iconic in terms of really being the face of a growing region that, you know, has flipped back and forth between Germany and France, and now is, if safely, one would hope, forever in France. But I would say that if you asked anyone what producer they think of when they think of Alsace, it would be Trimbach. Patrick, you want to make any general open comments?
Took the words out of my mouth there. We at Reserve, we pour a couple of the wines by the glass, so all of our guests will be familiar with them. But there's a reason that we do, and we probably always will, is that the wines are the best examples of the wines from the region, from the hands that do the best work in making the wines from the region. And we were talking about actually this. We'll get to the Gewurztraminer later, but it's just unlike any other producer. And then that's not even to talk about the Frédéric Emile, the Clos Saint Hugh, that sort of thing. And so the quality at every tier and the care that's put into every wine is really admirable, and it's also incredible that it's been going on for so long. That's I believe on your 13th generation, and that's something that's incomprehensible to us.
Yes.
13 generations ago, the United States didn't exist, and so it's we have no concept of that kind of lineage, and some of us may be lucky enough to, but it's
well, the indigenous population in the United States existed,
sure.
But the U.S. as we know it didn't. So, you know, and so I hesitate to use the word dependable, but that's why I tacked excellence right at the end of it. Because to me, as someone who buys wine and who deals with consumers to be able to tell anyone, buy any Trimbach wine, you will not be disappointed. And I don't work for you, so I'm saying that from the heart. So I'm going to welcome you officially. She is the 13th generation, as Patrick said, of her family making wine in Alsace. And she's going to tell us a little bit about, at some point in time, about it. She was the first woman to work actively in the family business, I believe. Maybe your little daughter will too, who knows? But now, not just Anne, but her sister, Frédéric, correct, are both working at the winery. And Anne studied economics and completed her master's degree. She studied in Strasbourg, and I'm going to well imagine that you are fluent, not just in English and French, and one would imagine German, and she loves to ski, something I've never been able to do because I lived in Greece for 15 years. We did swimming. We didn't do skiing. Please know that Michigan and Chicago welcome you, and thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much. So yes, my name is Anne Trimbach. I'm right now at home because it's a bit later in Alsace, in the village of Hunavir, just next to Ribeauvillé, sitting in my sofa, and I've already tasted 3 wines, just a little bit. We'll talk about everything about Alsace and of course a little bit about Trimbach as well tonight. And yes, I think we can start with the first beautiful picture of the evening, showing you how beautiful is Alsace. Hopefully when everything gets easier when in terms of traveling, you can come to see us if it's not done already and see that in real.
Oh, just gloriously beautiful. I mean, I told Don I tucked this picture in just because it was mind-stopping, the beauty. But here you're going to remind us where we are in Europe, right? Here we are.
Yes. So northeast of France, a small region at the border with Germany and Switzerland. Very, very, very beautiful region. Very, very small region. 120 kilometers long. How much in miles? I don't know. Then I need the help of somebody. But 120 kilometers for those of you who can translate of wine road. Lots of beautiful vineyards, northeast. So yes, very, very well located, close to everything except from the ocean. But then we have everything.
That's true. No ocean influence. So you've got altitude and you've got aspect, but it's semi-continental, right? And these mountains are the Vosges Mountains, right?
Side, yes, protecting us from the rain and the bad weather in a way. So they get all the rain and we get not so much.
But you get tremendous sunshine, even though you're at a relatively high altitude.
Yes, very much a lot, yes. So yes, a wonderful climate when it comes to growing grapes. We are based in Ribeauvillé, so in the heart of Alsace, right in the middle between Strasbourg in the north and Mulhouse in the south. So
here we go. Yeah.
Red arrow, yes. And Colmar, being 10-15 kilometers south from us, is the second driest region in France. So when you think about that, you would think every city of the south would be drier than us, but actually Alsace is one of the driest regions in France. And we benefit a lot from that, of course, because we have very healthy grapes. The sunshine influence is very important, and it's very sunny and for a quite long time, especially on the Grand Cru, beautiful hills. So we have a beautiful growing season, generally speaking. And yes, 1,800 hours of sun per year in Colmar.
Wow, so, and you just finished harvest, correct?
Yes, 10-15 days ago, we finished harvest. For most of people, it started the end of August, especially people who produce bubbles, which we don't. And we started 10 or 15 days later with Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris, and Pinot Noir, so the Pinot family. And then it lasted for 4 weeks, and we finished with Riesling and some Gewurztraminer.
Was it an early harvest, or is this pretty typical? How was this vintage?
Very early compared to my grandfather's time. Very different.
Mad about that. Bobby Frank was asking, considering your style, how are you dealing with managing the early harvest dates, maintaining freshness and phenolic ripeness, even though the harvest is so early? Can you comment on that a little bit?
Yes, it's earlier, but it's also warmer, and it's also drier. It's a very different. Everything is quite different from the past. My grandfather was probably harvesting in October, mid or end of October, maybe sometimes. And at that time, he had to chaptalize every vintage. It was ripe in a way, but it was not ripe like it is today. Today, we can say it's ripe. It's very ripe. It's riper than in the past. We don't need to chaptalize anymore. It has, and the rain doesn't come like in the old days. We have less rain during the growing season. It's completely changed from the 70s to today. You can even not compare anymore.
How do you have to deal in terms of healthier grapes? Do you have to deal with humidity at all?
It happens. Huh? There are some vintages when In the spring, before the spring, it's quite humid, so you have to deal with it, and sometimes it's more difficult than some other years. This year it was quite easy. No oidium, no mildew problem, nothing like that. But 2016, yes, it was a battle because you had a very short window to treat your vineyards before it would rain again.
So it's more related to the timing of the rain than the amount.
The timing, yes, the amount, how long it lasts. Now we have rain. Now it's raining almost every day.
But not an issue for the grapes. And you have been, correct me if I'm wrong, for quite some time practicing sustainable agriculture and even a little bit tighter than that in your Grand Cru vineyards, correct?
We have always been sustainable, and in 2008 we started with organic, with one vineyard, Clos Saint-Une, our most famous vineyard, and then another, and bloom, bloom, bloom. Now we can say 100%, and certification should happen in the next years.
Fantastic. As you well know, it's important to some markets, especially the United States. It's a very big deal right now. I showed this picture just because I thought it was glorious, and it shows, you made a comment about the diversity here, Patrick. You want to share that with everyone?
Yeah, I love this picture because you can see how sunny it gets in Alsace. You know, you don't think of a region so far north as being so sun-kissed, but then you also have all of these just little plots that get just a little bit more sun than the plot right next to them, or in some cases a lot more sun than the plot right next to them, and it shows that not all of the vineyard sites are created equally, and that's why you see a diversity of grape varieties grown, a massive diversity, in my opinion, of quality amongst producer to producer, plot to plot. And then, you know, you see that the grapes in specific areas are simply not going to ripen as well. And so you have to adjust on the viticulture side. And so I love this picture because I think it really illustrates that element of Alsace.
I'm going to start sipping on the Pinot Gris, but we do have one question on, somebody wanted to know if there are any thoughts about going to biodynamic viticulture.
We use a little bit of that as well in terms of how to say semis, when you put semis. Maybe Stéphanie can help me. She's in the back somewhere. Quand on fait des semis.
When you plant, when you replant.
Okay. When you plant, so herbs and different things that your soil or your vineyard would need, depending on where it is and how it's grown and blah, 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 and if it needs nitrogen or whatever. Yes, we use that, and we pay attention to more and more to the moon when we need to harvest a very special vineyard or to bottle a very special wine. But it's limited so far, but it's a little bit what I like. So maybe it will come someday. We'll see. I'm not.
Well, obviously there's an awareness of it
with the rest of the family.
I'm putting up the Pinot Gris because sometimes people are so well mannered on these tastings, they won't pick up a glass until we tell them to. There are no wine police, everyone. You are our friends.
Even if you don't see them.
Yes. But you can taste anything you want. If you've got all four, flip back and forth. But we're going to officially start tasting the Pinot Gris. So Anne can tell us a little bit about it, and Patrick and I can describe. But actually, we're tasting the Pinot Gris Reserve. So the back of the label is in the bottom right-hand corner, and we're tasting. Actually, I think we're tasting the 14 in both. No, we're tasting the 13 in Chicago and the 14 in Michigan, and all the other vintages are the same. How is this different? I'm going to ask the stupid question. It's my job. Tell us the difference between this and, say, Pinot Grigio. What makes Alsace Pinot Gris so unique, Anne?
The grape itself, where it's planted, the location, the terroir, the climate we have in Alsace, probably the vinification as well. But yes, the climate, because the ripeness of the grapes are probably not the same, and everything counts so much. So yes, it's a mix of everything. It's a mix of everything.
Well, you know, and consumers will see Pinot Gris, Pinot Grigio. That's why I mention it. But those of you who are tasting this, maybe for the first time, if you haven't had Alsace Pinot Gris before, I mean, the mouthfeel, the fragrance, everything about it is different. And frankly, in most cases, significantly more elevated. But I think, is the acidity of Pinot Gris usually softer? This seems nice and cleansing.
Yes, always.
Well, and one thing
Not that low, but not as high as Riesling.
That is high as Riesling, right?
So
one thing that I do point out about this wine specifically is within Alsace Pinot Gris, there's a lot of variability as well, depending on how a producer feels about botrytis, how much residual sugar they would like to leave, because in Alsace Pinot Gris can have some residual sugar. And so it's, there's a lot of producer preference with this grape variety specifically. You know, pretty much all the Riesling gets fermented dry. Most of the Gewurztraminer it has a little bit of sweetness, which is what makes the one we're going to taste unique. And so Pinot Gris, I feel like, is very much a product of its producer as well when it comes to Alsace. And that's part of what makes this one fun, because it's like simultaneously subtle and expressive. You know,
how does this one taste to you, Patrick?
So, you know, when you smell it, it smells very, on the nose, it's very minerally and savory. It smells like it's got this like petrichor, like wet sidewalk, you know, like rain sidewalk kind of nose. But then it's got this savory, you know, like Parmigiano rind kind of, like, you know, almost like beer yeast kind of like autolytic taste, or yeast, you know, yeasty kind of flavor.
It smells like spicy melons to me, like sweet.
Well, and then that's
nutmeg and ginger. And,
it's very tropical as well. You know, it's got this kind of like summery feel to it to go along with this, and so it's a really unique wine. But a lot of the stuff is easy to miss if you're not really paying attention to what this wine tastes like.
What vintage do you have on in your glass? Do you have?
I have nothing like you have. I have a 16 Pinot Gris. I have different vintages because we are a bit ahead, and we don't always keep every wine. And usually when I do tastings from home, like live tastings, I don't share the same exact vintage. But
I was figuring it would be different. Is yours? How's your 16 drinking? Is it?
It's very dry. It's drier than the other vintages, even more precise. Lots of acidity for a Pinot Gris, actually. A little touch of smokiness from the grape, and very much a lot of stone, yellow fruits. Very nice and very easy drinking.
Well, you bring up something. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's been a very successful wine from us in the US over the years, and that's why we have the special label in the US. We produce the same wine for the whole world, but in the US market we have those.
Oh, that's the US label. Yes, yes.
I took the American labels for tonight, but in France we have the yellow classic label usually.
You know what just occurred to me for people who are experiencing Alsace Pinot Gris or your Pinot Gris for the first time? What I love about it is it drinks equally well without food or with food, because you know the acidity is absolutely sufficient. It's actually slightly mouthwatering, and sometimes if people have a little residual sugar in their Pinot Gris, that won't be the case, but it is fulfilling and actually round without food, but it will perform great at the table and be very flexible as well.
Well, and on that note, almost every time, I've blind tasted this wine quite a few times in my studies, and every time I'm like, I call the acid higher than you would think Pinot Gris would be, and it's Pinot Gris. It all makes sense, and then the acid is like a little higher than I expect, and it's almost every time without fail. So
you mentioned we need to talk about the different soil types, because I can't think of another region that has as much diversity in their soil within a short distance. I mean, this is mind-stopping. All of these are prominent in the area, correct?
Mm-hmm. I would agree, of course. I'm not sure there is another area, or at least so far, not for winemaking. And yes, we are very lucky in Alsace, and it's amazing the diversity of soils from north to south. Just in the village of Ribeauvillé, where we are located, we are really on a fault line, which has brought what we call a mosaic of soils. And we have sandstone, limestone, marl limestone, marl clay. We have a bit of granite as well, just below the castles. And then when you go to the south of Alsace, you have volcanic soil. A few kilometers from where we are, there is all the granite that used to be in Ribeauvillé. You find it in another village. It has moved so much that it has created this richness of soils. And so we are rich in grapes, at least 7 different ones, plus the soils. There's a lot to learn in Alsace, and the names are very easy to remember.
This sandstone this pink sandstone is very specific to your area, correct?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Right?
Yes,
Yeah.
from the Vosges mountains. And it's pink and very sandy.
And when you're up on the slopes, do you get more volcanic soils or more granite soils higher up?
At the top of the mountains, yes, probably some granite, not probably, yes, granite soil, but volcanic actually as well, yes, in some parts of Alsace. It really depends where you are. It can be so different from one hill to the next one. So, and each valley has a specificity actually.
Now you mentioned before we launch into your very special family, something that I should have brought up right at the beginning, but I'll share the responsibility with Patrick, the number of grape varieties you have in Alsace, but you have what like 80% of the production is white, just a little bit of Pinot Noir, but you are dealing with, I can't even reel them off, but what are the noble ones? Gewurztraminer, Riesling?
Yes, Riesling is number 1, Gewürz, Pinot Gris, then you have Pinot Blanc and Pinot Auxerrois that are very much used for bubbles, for crémant. So they represent a huge percentage of the plantations. And then you have Muscat, which is quite small. You have Sylvaner. But probably a few people have some very rare grapes now that you don't see very much anymore, but you probably still find a little bit of Chasselas, and it's bottled Chasselas. You find, voilà.
And Muscat, what we call Muscat, right?
Yeah.
Somebody asked a question before we go on. Why the different label for the American market? I mean, is it because it's catchy, it's beautiful? Whose idea was it?
That was back in the 90s when we were with an importer, a previous wine importer. They wanted to push Pinot Gris because Pinot Grigio was booming at that time in the US, obviously, and people were drinking Pinot Grigio. And so we changed the label, and this wine became the number 1 selling bottle from Trimbach.
Well,
for a while, for 10 plus years at least, or 20, I should say. Because when I started in 2008, it was still number 1 wine.
Wow.
So back to my roots. This is a little bit of history now about my family and a short presentation for you. This is our winery about more than 100 years ago, 120 plus something years ago. It still looks the same. My cat is always noisy when I do a video live tasting. So yes, still the same look for the winery. We are still based in Ribeauvillé, but we started in Rigvire in 1626. We moved just before World War I to Ribeauvillé, where we are still based and where we have everything from press room to the bottling line, the storage room, and blah, 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 and blah, 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 everything.
And I learned, everyone, it's not Ribeauvillé, it's Ribeauvillé. So that just put that on the long list of things I've been spelling wrong and mispronouncing for decades. By the way, if you happen to have the classic Riesling, which I think in both states is 2018, or if you've got all 4 wines, by all means start sipping on it. We'll talk about it in just a little bit, but you want to talk about a difference pivoting from the Pinot Gris to the Riesling. It's spectacular. So this is what, the 12th and 13th generation?
Yes. So 13 generations today. When I started in 2008, my great uncle Hubert was still working with us, and I little by little took over his destinations, let's say, in terms of traveling. My father Pierre on the left side, he's the winemaker and has been since 79. My uncle Jean, his brother, has been the ambassador since 85 actually. My cousin Julien came along 4 or 5 years ago to be the next winemaker. My sister, she's the hidden face in the offices, and she's the the computer. She knows how to use everything well.
She takes a good picture, though. You got to make sure and put her on the website.
Sorry?
You need to put her on the website because she takes a good picture.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Of the three.
And you have me in front of you. I'm traveling a lot like Jean, or at least I used to. For the last 12 years, I've been spreading the words about the family and Alsace.
So was Hubert, your uncle, your great uncle? He was the international ambassador for Trimbach. That's why I got to meet him when he came to Detroit. So I think the universe is in alignment that you were going to come to Detroit as well. And maybe you can tell us now. You started working in the family business in 2008. And was I correct in saying you were the first woman in the family to do so? How did that work out?
My grandmother was working as well, but she was hidden. She was helping at the bottling line. She was doing the hard job, the cooking for everybody. But she was not shown in the light, or I don't know how to say. I'm traveling. People know me. I'm a face for the winery, which it's true. No woman has been before me. So, and I had the question when I wanted to join, like, are you going to be able because you're a woman? Voilà.
But obviously, it happened, and it seemed to happen naturally. I mean, you seem extraordinarily comfortable in your role. So. There wasn't a period of time where there was difficulty? They just got used to you being there pretty quickly?
It's working with the family, you'll always have adjustments to do. Yes. But I've never had difficulties, at least when I was traveling, never. And yes, sometimes maybe sometimes with the family, but nothing dramatic.
But there are other women who are prominent in the wine business in Alsace too. And I think you had mentioned there's many. What did you say? There's a tasting group called Les Divines d'Alsace?
Les Divines d'Alsace, the Divines of Alsace, yes. It was just a few women at the beginning, I would say more than, or at least 10 years ago. And now I don't know the amount of women, but yes, in Alsace, there are lots of women working in the wine industry today, and running wineries as well.
So I'm playing with the Riesling.
Yes, we're going to taste the next wine if you want. Maybe you've tasted it already, but voilà. We love Riesling at the winery. We own approximately 60 hectares when we combine every grape variety. That's the total amount. And we purchase grapes as well for some of the classic wines, such as this Riesling, Pinot Blanc that we don't taste tonight, etc. And Riesling for us represents 50%. The half of the production is Riesling because we love it. We believe it's the most wonderful white grape in the world, because of the versatile styles of Riesling you can have, the dry style it can be, the ageability it has, the drinkability it has, the pairings you can do with food. It's a wonderful grape variety. So we produce many different Rieslings, and tonight we'll taste two. This one is the first one, so it's what we call our everyday Riesling. And of course 100% Riesling, and 20% of the grapes come at least from Grand Cru vineyards. And
that's pretty extraordinary. And by the way, I'm interrupting I don't know if you caught what she said. You own an extraordinary amount of vineyards, because that's quite unusual. If we translate from hectares, I think it's like over 130 acres. For those of us who don't have a calculator in front of us, but isn't that very unusual, that high percentage of ownership?
60 hectares, unusual. Boy, it's a good amount, yes, for sure. And then we purchase grapes on an average of 80 to 100 other hectares. So total is 1 million bottles production every year. And this Riesling, yes, 20% at least from Grand Cru, but from grapes we purchase great grapes, if I may say. Of course, dry vinification, as you can feel, it's bone dry, always a beautiful, nice acidity. We vinify in stainless steel until we ferment until it's completely dry. And if you find a 2014 on the shelf, don't be worried, because it will still be very good today. You can keep this for 5-10 years, probably a little more, but then you don't have to expect the freshness of the fruits you have in a very young wine. So
I think what you just said, Patrick, and then I'll hand it to you to describe it, but it's, you know, in the United States, in warmer growing regions and using different grape varieties, we get nervous. I get nervous as a sommelier and a buyer and as an ambassador to the public to recommend white wines with significant bottle age unless I know them. But frankly, when you're talking about Alsace Riesling, this stuff ages, and we're talking, this is their ambassador, their classic Riesling, not single vineyard, not reserve. And if you forget about it in your cellar or your closet for several years, it will just smile a different kind of smile when you pull the cork. Patrick, how's this showing to you?
Well, before I get into the tasting notes, I'll also add, you know, to pile on top of that, if you do find a 2014 on a shelf, you know, you should rejoice instead of you'll have a treat. You know, the fruit on this wine is very, it's tart and fresh, but it's also very, I guess it reminds me of like a perfectly ripe Granny Smith apple, where it's like simultaneously tart and ripe, where it's a tart fruit that is perfectly ripe, or even like a white peach, you know, it's kind of peachy and you're into these orchard fruits, but then it's also very, it's just, it's definitely Riesling. You know, you put your nose in this, it's got this like, this is a funny tasting note because it doesn't sound pleasant, but almost like a tire store, like, you know, this like rubbery kind of plastic, you know.
Well, for those of you, I'm going to interrupt just to translate this for the consumers that are listening. You know, it's not uncommon for Riesling to have this this compound called TDN that comes across a little bit like petrol. You know, and Anne can weigh in on this on older ones, but it can be more prominent, but it's not always there. And it's always hand in hand right next to this gorgeous peachy, appley, limey fragrance, and flowers. Let's not forget flowers too, because I just love the smell of this wine. And those of you who want to learn how to blind taste, you can memorize this guy. You know, this wine will never betray you. Do you love older Rieslings personally, Anne? Do you indulge in them quite a bit?
I have a big craving. Can we say that?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
I think actually, if those of you who have the Frédéric Emile, if you want to go ahead and pick it up, but I think we can go ahead and look at a couple more beautiful pictures. Oh, I know what I want to ask you as we go on. What are your personal favorite foods to have with dry Riesling? You know, if you are craving dry Riesling, young or old, and you're cooking or you're going to a restaurant, what are your go-to, your favorite foods?
It depends where I am. If I'm somewhere close to the ocean, like Washington, Seattle, I will have oysters. For sure, nothing to cook, but easy and so fresh and always the best pairing. And if I'm in Alsace, I would have a beautiful piece of ham that has been cooked for hours and hours, so it's melting in your mouth, like jarret de porc or something like that, with well, usually potatoes or choucroute or something like that. It's always perfect. Or a beautiful fish, a white fish, a lake fish. Yes. Simple food.
We have a good easy question. Why are the corks different? You're using both DM, the composed corks, and natural cork, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these, any reason somebody asked the question why the corks are different? Does it matter?
We tried plastic corks in the old days, like for vintages 2005 and 6. It was not a success for us, for our wines, so we didn't continue. We continued with DM. That's just to avoid the problem of cork, the corked bottles. And so far, it's been working quite nicely. So.
Do you use natural cork at all?
Yes, for all the top wines. No
all the top wines.
Frédéric Emile or Clos Sainte-Une. natural corks for all the top wines. We now use screw caps as well for some of the wines because it was a big request from some countries.
Oh, bravo. I didn't know that. Did those come into the United States or no?
Pinot Blanc, yes.
That's
And
great.
Yes. So, pretty pictures, yes, of the winery, the two iconic towers, and the Grand Cru Geisberg that we use for Frédéric Emile just behind the winery.
Oh, right here?
Right here,
yes.
Yeah. And then the cellar to show you that we use, well, stainless steel, of course, quite a lot, but also old casks. And this one is especially old because it's from 1717 and it's still in use.
Holy moly, that's amazing.
It's a round shape. All of them are oval, the other ones, but in the old days, it was round at first. And then they realized oval works as well and it takes less space in a cellar. So this is a very old one with the decor from those days. We also use concrete and glass tanks. It's like a big bathroom. Very neutral material for us. We don't want new wood because we don't want to hide the fruitiness of the wines, even Pinot Noir. And we like to cellar our wines before to sell them. So that's also why you don't find already Riesling 2019 on your market, in your markets, because we keep at least the wines 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or sometimes 6 or 7 or 8 years before to release them in the bottles for bottle aging. So we have 3 million bottles in the cellar when we produce one. So
That's amazing. I mean, I have to tell you too, I would have never noticed this. I got chills when you said this was circular because we always see oval barrels, older barrels, but also not from the 1600s. This is very unusual, but how interesting that that transition took place to oval barrels because they maximize the space more effectively. And then here we have as a great transition to Cuvée Frédéric Emile, AKA CFE, or what are we calling it? Freddie M. And this is the 05 resting comfortably in the cellar and some older vintages.
Yes, we have a nice library. This is part of the library. And it goes back to the 50s. Of course, not every vintage, because at that time it was an emergency to sell wine and not to keep some. So we have a few bottles from the 50s and the 60s, a bit more from the 70s, and then year after year we decided to keep more and more great wines. So we have today we have a nice library.
I have to ask you if because I've never perceived this in your wines as they get older. I don't perceive any oxidation. It just, the wine changes. It changes character, especially the older Rieslings. But, you know, the primary fruit drops off and then it picks up other characteristics. Is this typical to Alsace Riesling, or are you particularly careful in the winemaking process? To make sure
I would guess both are counting. I mean, you need to make great wines if you want them to last. And of course, Alsace has something special in the soils, in the terroir that makes that helps the wine to live a longer life, especially when they come from the hillside, so from the Grand Cru vineyards and the special vineyards, not the wines from the plain of Alsace. Maybe they don't last as much time, I would say. So yes, everything. Next wine is Frédéric Emile Riesling, which I have 2012. You have 2011, yes. Obviously. I'm just a vintage ahead, but this is the current release here in France. So we waited until January to release this vintage. It is the vineyard just behind the winery called Grand Cru Geisberg and Osterberg, because here we have always blended these two Grand Cru way before they were classified as Grand Cru. My ancestor Frédéric Emile himself, who was my great-great-great-grandfather, he was already making this wine, which was called Réserve Spéciale or Réserve Particulière, depending on it had two names before, depending on the time. Geisberg and Osterberg have been classified as Grand Cru in the 70s, and my grandfather decided to keep the name Frédéric Emile as it was. So, of course, it's forbidden to blend two Grand Cru in Alsace if you want the appellation Grand Cru, the appellation. So we don't have Grand Cru written on the labels nowhere. You can't guess it's a Grand Cru if you don't know that it's a Grand Cru.
You can guess when you smell it, Anne, I will tell you, because nothing
when
has
you compare the two wines side by side, there is something more special in this wine for sure.
Can you tell us about this gentleman, your great-great-great-great-grandfather, or however many greats? What do you know about him?
But not that many things, but he was obviously a great winemaker. He made us quite famous in Europe. He started to export our wines to Belgium and Germany, and he won a prize at the end of the 19th century about for his Rieslings, actually. So we were already known for Riesling at that time. And the beauty of this wine is really about the soil. It's a mix of marl, limestone, and sandstone. It's south and south facing. And it's old vines, not as old as they used to because we replanted a part of the vineyard. So only 40 years old right now, which is already a good amount.
Okay, I have a stupid question. Do you produce Frédéric Emile and the two Grand Crus every year, or does it? How is the decision made on when to produce Frédéric Emile and the two Grand Crus from which it comes?
In the cellar. We always produce them, we always make the wine, and if my father believes they deserve the name, then he bottles them. It's not happened for a very, very, very long time that we did not make these two wines. I would say 84 and 87, not for both, 87 only for Clos Sainte-Une, I think, or just we had a little bit, but in the 80s, the last time. Since then, it's been bottled every year.
Are there specific parcels from the two Grand Cru vineyards that are dedicated to Frédéric?
Oui, always the same forever. You can see them right in front of you. Not on the terraces, but just below the first terraces. It's quite big. We have from the left to the right, wherever you have the buckets of wine. This is all of us. This is Geisberg at the beginning of Oosterberg, and we have 3-point-something hectares. So this is a wine, we have some land just behind the winery, really. It's magnificent. And
we have a couple of questions regarding this in the chat, actually. Number one, you mentioned that 2012 Frédéric Emile is in France, and that's the current release. Is the 2012 currently in the US market as well?
That's a good question.
Maybe a question for Sean, honestly, he might know. But
that's a good question. Maybe on the ocean somewhere.
Sure.
So close to you.
Yeah, and then the other question was about the Grand Crus. So this person is obviously familiar with your wines, but he says, was the decision to buy the plot in the Grand Cru of Schlossberg and sell that wine and Geisberg with the Grand Cru vineyard on the label, was that a difficult decision? And then also, do you ever think you'd put Grand Cru designation on Clos Sainte-Une or Frédéric Emile? Which I think I could probably answer even for you. It would be no to the second question, but go ahead then.
No, I don't think these two will move. I mean, Frédéric Emile is the signature wine today, unless it has no more, how to say, sense, no more meaning to make it as it is made today. We think Geisberg and Oosterberg bring each other something. Oosterberg, the austerity, Geisberg, the fat characters of the wine, the largeness of the wine in a way. They complement each other. Clos Sainte-Une, the label has been the same since 1919, so there's no way we change that, I think. It's a big anniversary. It was a big anniversary last year. And then
you described the different, you actually sort of snapshotted the two Grand Crus. If somebody asks you, what's the character of Frédéric Emile, what do you tell them? You know, what is consistent in Frédéric Emile's expression? Complexity, or, I mean, to me, it's always complex. When I put my nose in the glass, they just layers and layers, but
yes, minerality and complexity and length. Mm-hmm.
There's always a new something in every smell, every taste. It's a stunning wine. For the Clos Sainte-Une question, can you talk about, I guess, why, because Clos Sainte-Une is within the Rosacker Grand Cru, do you know anything about the initial decision in 1919 to, I mean, I guess Grand Crus didn't exist in 1919, so that's probably why. But why, when Grand Crus were delineated, why they didn't go with Rosac or Grand Cru?
Because my family has, I think, always been really behind the names and the traditions and following the traditions, and this label has not changed. Nothing has changed from the beginning to today. So it's Clos Sainte-Une. It's been also very famous under that name.
So why mess with it? Is what
I don't know
what I would say.
Travel the world like that with this wine, and today it's recognized as Clos Sainte-Une. So I don't know. It wouldn't. Rosacer wines are wonderful, and it's part of Rosacer, and I'm very proud to say it's part of Rosacer. But Clos Sainte-Une is an iconic label that probably cannot change, let's say.
If it's okay with everyone, I'm going to show some unbridled enthusiasm in talking about how this wine is smelling and drinking, because it is Riesling, absolutely, but it is, the fact that it's Riesling to me is not the most important thing about it. It is so specifically Frédéric Emile in its complexity. And what I mean by complexity, it sounds like such a fuzzy term, but when you smell it, I was telling Anne before we all got on that I didn't want to describe it, that there's something so, it's like listening to music that is very complex. You know, you don't want to pick apart the orchestra. It has everything in there. And on the palate too, there's the acidity, there's the citrus, there are the flowers on the nose, there's the terroir, but and the acidity actually is very well mannered, even though it's mouth-watering. You can taste through it easily, and you don't look to something like cheese or something like protein to soften it. It just is long, and I love paying attention to the length of it. And sommeliers, somms like us often talk about minerality, or that, like Patrick was saying earlier, that wet rock character that's in there. If there's petrol, it's like a secondary thing, but I think you can, this wine is what the Italians would call vino di meditazione. You could play with it for a couple, 3 hours and let it go from, 45 degrees Fahrenheit to 60. And you will be forced by the wine to drink it slowly, to pay attention to it. Obviously, I like it a lot. And
I'll also include that even being 9 years old with all this complexity, there's still brightness and freshness and tension in the wine that again, I mean, we were talking about this earlier, is, it's not even close to reaching its full age potential. It's 9 years old for a white wine, and it's just getting started. It's amazing.
I find it very exciting, but Anne, you get to taste the Grand Crus a lot more often than we do. I am perfectly happy to have Frédéric Emile accessible to us, so thank you. There was one question about elaborating more on food, and I want to say one thing about the acidity in Riesling as a general rule, and this could be Riesling from anywhere, is that one of the reasons why it's so food friendly is it loves food that has acidity, which will make the wines actually, and ironically, taste softer. But it also is spectacular with foods that are very rich, the happy F word, fatty, so that Riesling just slices like a saber through rich food. I mean, there's pretty much nothing it won't coexist with. And that's why, somms, I'm trying to use the word somm. I like the word sommelier, like Riesling so much. Anything you want to say about the 11 and the 12 vintages of this on before we go on to the Gewürz?
That you can drink them now or keep them for another 15, 20 years. 11 is very, very accessible today. It was a warmer kind of vintage. So it delivers a lot today already. And the 2012 is, if I may say, a classic vintage, if we still have some, with a lot of fruitiness. And quite open already today as well. But both of them you can drink or wait, up to you. Is
global warming impacting Trimbach and other wine producers in Alsace in a significant way?
Yes, in a good way and in a more complicated way as well. We benefit and we have more difficulties. It's both, and it's talking about Gewurztraminer. It's a harder task today for Gewürz when you want to have a dry Gewürz and a disciplined wine like we do. It's hard because when you pick the grapes, they are so ripe. If you ferment completely dry, then you get too much alcohol in your wine. And we cannot irrigate and we cannot plant higher because it's still too cold if it's planted higher. So let's say Gewurztraminer will be a challenge in the next years, hopefully not so much because we love this grape. It's so unique when it's grown in Alsace. It has, to me, more characters and more exuberance in a good way when it's planted in our region, probably due to the soil and the climate again. It's a fantastic grape variety. Sometimes misunderstood. Sometimes people are afraid just from the name. But when it's well made, it's to me, it's amazing. And it's amazing to pair it with different styles of food. Especially for you in the US, you have access to everything, every style of food, especially Asian or fusion cuisine, Cajun food. We don't have
yes.
We don't have that much choice in Alsace. Well, we find good sushi today, but it's slower. So you have access to every good food, Indian as well, easily to pair this wine. And of course, a piece of strong cheese. It's always a great match when you.
What are a couple of your very favorite cheeses?
Ooh la la, good question. Probably goat cheese for me.
Huh.
Maybe due to the Riesling, I don't know. I love Riesling, and I don't know. I love every kind of goat cheese very much. And if I really have a craving for one type of cheese, it would be great mozzarella or burrata from Italy.
which coexists with all types of wine. I have to tell you, this Gewurztraminer, I love whoever in your team thought up the word disciplined is wonderful because quite often.
It's a Swedish journalist that once said to me that he is only drinking Trimbach Gewürz because it's disciplined. And since then, I've been using the word every time.
Oh, well, we thank you, whoever you are, because I love it. And the fact that you are punching the fact that this is a dry Gewurztraminer. Also, the acidity is surprisingly mouth-watering on this. And, you know, people always talk about roses and a flower garden and intense spice. But it's very well integrated on the aromatics on this wine. It's gentle, if I can say that. Maybe that's my version of disciplined. And it's round, but it's not sweet or soft. I find it really lovely. Do you think, is it a fair generalization to say that Gewurz performs better in Alsace than other growing regions?
No, it's very good in other growing regions as well, but I would say it has more characters, more intensity, more exuberance, more the right balance when it's well made, and when the vinification is well made, you have a potential for this wine that is quite incredible.
Well, I think I also, one of the reasons I loved that word disciplined as well is when I was tasting this wine last night, when I opened the wine and was tasting it, what I initially thought of was it's like wearing just the right amount of perfume. You know, it's if you wear just a little bit too much perfume, it's like nobody wants to be around you. They kind of shuffle away from you, and it's cloying and it's too floral and aromatic. And this has like the perfumed elements, but it's just well balanced, restrained, it's disciplined. So
no, it's just lovely. Somebody's going to be drinking it with homemade Thai curry tonight. And we have a friend, Richard, who has been dying to ask this question. He wants to know the 11 Frédéric Emile, if you can go back to Frédéric Emile in a minute, versus the 12 or other vintages. Can he happily age this, or does he have to be concerned about it being more forward? Is its life going to be shorter than other vintages?
Not especially, maybe slightly, but it depends if he if he wants to talk about 40 years or something like that. Maybe then, maybe not that long, but 15 more years, no trouble. Both of them, almost every vintage. I would be afraid of 2006 to keep it longer. And actually, my father has always said, you are all wrong. This 2006 will be amazing one day. Wait. So like, because it was a more difficult vintage, but usually you can wait 15, 20 years, but it depends how you like Riesling. If you like older vintages, then I encourage you to wait. If you like the fruitiness and the freshness it has right now, you can still keep it 5 years at least. It won't move that much.
Is your father working hand in hand with your cousin? Is it Julien now?
Julien, yes. Yes, Julien has been in the vineyards for 3-4 years in a row, because you cannot make great wine if you don't understand vineyards. And now he's more in the cellar, and yes, he's learning.
Is he a young man? May we ask how old he is? Is he in his 20s?
He is 28, yes.
It's a gorgeous picture. So this is Harvest 2020. How gorgeous
yes.
is that?
Not too far above, yes, not too far from Ribeauvillé, yes. Difficult to explain exactly. And this was in Berkheim. Voilà.
I should show that again. Patrick, are there a couple more questions you can address before we liberate Anne from us?
Yeah, there are.
On an hour.
One of the questions that I'm particularly interested in, and there are two that are kind of related. The first one is is in America, we often think of Riesling as a sweeter grape variety, largely because of some German exports, some low quality wines from all over the world that were, meant to be cheaply produced and cheaply sold and drunk early. How do you market Riesling to ensure that people understand that your wines are dry? And I think I know the answer, but I want to let Anne take this one and say, how do you get people to know your wines are dry?
Good question, because it's not written on the front label. At least it's on the back label. It should be, at least. How do? We spread the message. We speak about them. We show them. That's a good question. Beside that, I don't know. I try to say to people as much as I can that Riesling is not always sweet, and sometimes I have to force them, especially in the US. Tell them, like, you don't like Riesling? That's not possible. You don't want to try my Riesling? No, I'm going to force you to try my Riesling. And then they're suddenly like, oh, it's dry, I like it. But yes, it's funny. No, it's not funny actually, but it's crazy how much people are still, they see the shape of the bottle, they see Riesling on the bottle, they are afraid, like, oof, what's going to happen to me? But things have evolved, and in Alsace, it has drastically changed. The style is much drier than in the old days. The trend is going higher and higher in quality. All the younger generation that has traveled a lot has passion for what they do, and they do it with the heart, and they do very well, and they do better than the previous generation.
Well, you have almost 60 people on tonight that got the dry Riesling message, but you also there are two categories of wines we haven't talked about that do contain sweetness. Not always, but often, or most often, is Vendange Tardive and Sélection de Grenoble. And we have a question relating to late harvested or sweet wines. How do you make that decision, or does it depend on the vintage? Do you produce them every year?
My father, Pierre, has been the president of this committee of sweeter wines for 20 years now.
Yes.
And so we produce them only when we believe the vintage is fabulous. Of course, we try every year with Gewurztraminer Vendange Tardive, which has become the easiest and has always been the easiest to produce. Sélection de Grenoble, it becomes more and more difficult in our area, especially because where we have our best vineyards, it's quite windy, and it's a risk to take because you leave the grapes on the vine so long. So basically, it's more risky, and if we do some, it's very, very little. When it comes to Riesling, Vendange Tardive, or Pinot Gris, it's very, very rare. It's difficult to make some, but Gewurztraminer Vendange Tardive has always a lot of success actually in restaurants by the glass when it's the winter is coming, Christmas is coming, when you have big parties, then you open this kind of wine, and it's magnificent because when they reach a high potential alcohol, they have all the complexity and the concentration, but the acidity as well and the balance. Oh, it's quite enjoyable. Huh?
Now, we talked about Vendange Tardive, and everyone, when we say VT or Vendange Tardive, we mean late harvest. I'm going to ask the other stupid question. Are they always sweet? Are they sometimes dry? And how do we know?
The age, because of course, if we take, let's say, Gewurztraminer 71 or 83 Vendange Tardive, you will have less sugar impression, and you will have more glycerol impression, so it will be a little oilier, richer in a way. You will still feel that it used to be a rich wine, but you will feel the sugar a bit less. Then when it's a young Vendange Tardive Gewurztraminer, like 15, for example, if you have VT on the label, Vendange Tardive, you will have sugar.
You will have sugar. And what Anne said is hugely important. It isn't that the measurable sugar is less. It's the damnedest thing. It's the impression of sugar is less as the wine gets older. I have a friend of mine, Tim Gazer, who's a master sommelier and a great wine taster, was talking about this the other day. So that's another thing that's great about Rieslings is, or any wines as they get older, the impression of sugar is less. I have to ask you, your kitty cat is still talking to you. What is her name or his name?
He's called Deezer because in France, I don't know if you use this website, Deezer.com. It's for music, to like Spotify or whatever you use in your country. And 12 years ago, when I got it, a friend of mine said, "Your cat has sound," which means, "Wow, he's beautiful." And so it got a name, Deezer.
Deezer. Well, we appreciate Deezer's company. We have two quick questions before you leave us that have to do with the people who work the vineyards. You know, first of all, how is the pandemic affecting, you know, work in the vineyards? And secondly, do you have a hard time these days in modern times getting people to work the vineyards, or is your labor force stable?
Very stable, very beautiful people, very young team, very passionate, very amazing. We love them. We believe they do a great job. They never stopped working. They worked more during the lockdown. They could because they all have one tractor. They are not in contact with the others. So everyone after the other, they took the equipment.
Oh, hand harvesting, right? It's all hand harvested.
Ah, oui, and during harvest, no problem to get people because they always come back every year the same. So it's a big family today. It's everybody knows each other. You don't have to reach out to them. They reach out to you already 6 months before, like, "Hey, we come back. Don't forget us." So, yes, we were with masks and everything. We paid attention, and when you were outside and far away from the others, it was fine. Huh? And sometimes you work alone one vineyard or. Voilà. I'm talking harvest and not harvest, but yes, it's.
And yes, there's a question: do your noble rot Rieslings make it to the United States? And yes, they do. You know,
they do, but we did not produce some for so long. If you find some, it's going to be older vintages, which are amazing today, but you might have a hard task to find some. We try every year, huh, but it's not easy.
Patrick, do your folks want to chime in on anything before we let Anne leave us, or do you have any closing comments?
Not particularly. I just wanted to offer a big thank you to Anne for joining us. I know the time difference is weird, and then I do want a small shout out to Sean Mankowski for getting involved with Frédéric Emile. You know, we had to do some shipping gymnastics, and Sean was really at the center of that.
He initiated it, absolutely. So thank you, Sean, for that.
And we needed every last bottle, so I really appreciate the efforts he went to. So for the Grand Rapids people, if you're drinking the Frédéric Emile, you owe Sean a big thank you. Other than that, I'm just really grateful to taste all these wines, to get them in front of people, because I mean, I said this already. I just believe that the quality is so high. And it's simultaneously very high quality and very approachable no matter what stage of your wine drinking life you're in. And so they go with lots of food. They're relatively at a specialty wine store or a retailer like Plum Market with a big wine selection or from Reserve, they're relatively well distributed and not difficult to find, but
and affordable, absolutely.
And in the category, I think they just outpunch their weight class, you know, time and again from top to bottom. So that's.
Patrick, thank you for collaborating. Anne, I had to show this picture. Is this at Christmas time? Is this when we should come visit you? You're not working the vineyards then, right?
We are still working the vineyards even in the winter, and that's probably, yes, December, and it could be 2010 because the snow is rarer and rarer.
Oh, it's just glorious. And I have to show this. This is actually a wonderful logo. And I want to give a personal thank you to Stephanie Tuin from Tuin Communications, who was the ambassador, not just for Trimbach, and in this case, specifically for Trimbach, but for other Alsace producers, and to tell everyone that next week at Plum Market, we are going to do something extraordinarily different than what we're doing tonight. And that's one of my favorite things, actually, is to pivot from one subject to another. We're going to address the very wormy subject of natural wine. We're going to do it with an American natural wine producer, Jason Charles, and from Binca Minor, and some wines from the Dressner portfolio. But I am keeping track of all of the questions that were asked that we couldn't get to. We can't thank you enough, and please know that you've got a lot of friends in Michigan. So when you can travel safely, please come visit you, and we wish you and your beautiful family, especially Jean, all the best.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, I've been to Michigan already. I know that I have a few friends over there, Trimbach friends, and hopefully someday it's going to be easy to travel again and to drink a glass together for real. Thank you for listening. Thank you for enjoying our wines. Thank you for your love for Alsace, and please continue to spread the message for me, for us.
It's an easy thing to do. À votre santé, ici here to everyone. Yep.
Yes, I'm out of wine, but I mean it.
Oh, I'm almost out of wine. I don't know about Patrick. Are you working tonight?
I am. I'm about to go onto the floor for service. So.
Well, you will be very cheerful tonight, thanks to Alsace and to Trimbach. If anyone wants to hang for a little while, I'll stay with you, Patrick. If you have to go, I understand. And Anne, I hope you get some well-deserved rest. Thank you for your company and for bringing us all together. You know, these virtual tastings are intimate, and how cool it is that, especially in these times, wine brings us together and makes us ignore our differences. I, for one, think that's a spectacular thing. Yes.
Merci beaucoup. À bientôt. Au revoir.
Take good care. À bientôt. I'm not closing the tasting. If anyone wants to stay and chat, you're welcome to. But Patrick and any other comments, Patrick?
I mean, there's a lot that can be said. I have one little anecdotal comment, because there were a lot of questions about the Vendange Tardive, the late harvest wines, and you know, my wife Camelia and I actually, for one of I can't remember if it was our dating anniversary or our engagement anniversary, we were lucky enough to drink 1989 Clos Saint Hugh and Vendange Tardive, and they're in the U.S. They've only produced, I think, of that specific wine like 4 vintages, and so it's if you can track some down, it's worth it. It was really a stunning thing. But the late harvest wines with the right food are also, I mean, Anne mentioned this, around Christmas time, around with some, even with, I like them with really spicy curry. The Vendange Tardive Gewurztraminer with really like intensely spicy curry.
Especially if you get it slightly colder.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you're not doing the wine a favor, but you drink, you know, you can let it warm up and you can finish it after you're done eating. But I think if you cinch it with a little bit of a colder temperature, it works really well. Has Camelia learned to like wine as much as you do? I mean, she does pretty well.
It's funny because she does love wine. She's maybe a little bit less like intense about it. She's a little more measured, but she's
more balanced than we are.
But she doesn't have as many screws loose, that's for sure. But she has learned to love some great wine. You know, she loves really good Riesling. She loves, you know, and she actually sent me a text message like midway through this because we were supposed to be in Alsace in August, and so we were going to be traveling to Germany and Alsace, and then obviously that got canceled. So so this was kind of a, you know, a surrogate for now, a little substitute trip.
I wanted to, somebody asked, is in the exchange with the German Baden, I don't know if you can see that. I wanted to unmute everyone, but I'm not doing
I
a
don't know
good
if
job.
this webinar format.
I don't think I can. If somebody wants to speak up, if you put it in the chat room, I can unmute you individually. But somebody asked a question about Baden. Do you see that, Patrick?
Let's see. It says, in the exchange with the German Baden region, it looks like an incomplete question. It looks like the first half of the question.
Okay. I am sorry, by the way, personally, that we didn't do this chat room style, but you know, when we have so much ground to cover, and we have somebody, you know, of Anne's depth, I just wanted us to be more directed, and Patrick didn't argue with me on this.
And it's a window of time, you know, it's already so generous of her to be giving us any time, and so we really don't want to monopolize it. So.
Well, you've got to get to work. It's 4:15. It is a glorious Michigan day. I hope it's nice in Chicago as well. Patrick, I give you a big actual hug, and it's always great to collaborate with you, and I hope we do it again.
And I can't wait till we can collaborate in person again sometime.
Wouldn't that be nice? Well, I told you, you have to invite me to these fancy schmancy dinners you're doing.
You're going to be invited to the, well, we were in the works for April or May, I remember, and then
I was going to speak at one of them and say something or another, but Stephanie, thank you so much for
thank you,
put into this.
Thank you, both of you. I so enjoyed it. I know I'm behind the scene, but Madeline, you are so wonderful to listen to. Patrick, I loved what you added, also your own experience. So when you go to Alsace, please let me know.
thank you.
This is someone to keep your eye on, Stephanie. You heard it from me. This is a gentleman that I personally love, and he's on a vertical climb in the business, and soon to be a father, if I have to, if you don't mind my saying that. Stephanie, I know I'll talk to you soon, hopefully before Women in Wine Leadership Symposium. And we do have this recorded, so we'll be sending it to you, and as well to Patrick and everyone who attended this meeting. Okie doke, I'm going to say goodnight.
Cheers, everyone.
Take good care.